It's a bit weird that I have to introduce Rabbi Twersky. I think out of all the people here, I'm the only one who never heard him beforehand. Rabbi Twersky, a rabbi, a doctor, psychiatrist, a professor, an author of many inspiring books, a chassid, and an inspiring speaker. I'm not quite sure which of the above hats you will be wearing tonight, hopefully all of them. We are very privileged to be sitting here and listening to Rabbi Twersky, and I'm sure we'll be very inspired as we leave this hall in an hour's time. This talk tonight is possible with the generous sponsorship of the Glassman family in memory of their grandmother, Zehava Bat Chaim Yosef. And without any further ado, I would invite Rabbi Twersky.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm thrilled to hear that you have not heard me before. Because you see, I have this problem that, Baruch Hashem, your memories are intact. My memory is absolutely gone. I don't remember what I have said and what I have not said. So, there may be a situation in which I will try to speak about something, and you'll say, oh, I heard him say that already, at least once. So it's wonderful to know that there's someone around who has not heard me before, so at least for him this might be something new from me. Always wonderful to get back to Efrat. Many wonderful friends here. We had many enjoyable years in Efrat until we decided to move to Yerushalayim HaKodesh. It's a little bit of a challenge to speak before Yom Kippur during the Selas Yemei Tshuva, because one's obligation is to do something about Teshuvah. Well, to talk about Teshuvah means that you're telling people that they have to do Teshuvah, and that's sort of giving Musa. So who am I to give Musa? But something occurred a few weeks ago where I developed a bit of an insight. I was in the doctor's office, and I was waiting in the waiting room, and there was another gentleman with a white beard, and he was waiting too, but he was there before me. So when he was called in to the doctor's office, as he passed by me, I stood up for him. So he said to me, "You don't have to stand up for me, you're older than I am." So if I'm 81 and he's 79, so I'm older than he is. But then it occurred to me, the mitzvah that you're supposed to get up and show respect for an older person, does that mean that he's an older person, an elderly person, and you are older than him, that you are exempt from that mitzvah? It doesn't say you have to stand up only for somebody who is older than you. So I realized that, even though I may be older than him, but he's okay, and I should stand up for him. So I'm using that insight with the idea that the Talmud says, Ashrei Hador, fortunate is the generation, Shehagedolim Nishmaim Liktanim, that the great people are willing to listen and accept something from people who are lesser than them. So, even though I may be a lesser person, I can try to talk about teshuvah. Not that I'm in a position to give anyone mussar. Clearly, the topic of the theme of Yom Kippur is forgiveness. The title of the Chag is Yom Kippurim. But there is, I think, some need for clarification of what forgiveness is all about. In Yitzhak Friday night in Shabbat, we will be saying, Atu b'chatonu mikol ha'amim, ahavta etanu v'asita banu, v'atita lanu, and Hashem, you have given us as this day of Yom Kippur, libchila v'lislicho kapo. 3 different synonyms for forgiveness. Forgiveness and pardon, whatever other synonym there might be. 3 different words that you have given us this day for slicha, mechila, and kapola. And then it goes on, and v'limcho bo et kol avonotenu, and to forgive all our sins. Now wait a minute, what were those first 3 for? Once you've said that the day is for slicha, mechila, kapol, what are you adding on with limcho bo et kol avonotenu? So it occurred to me that maybe the meaning is this. You know, many of us, I think, are impressed with the idea of Yom Kippur, that we're asking Hashem to forgive our sins, the things that we did that were in violation of of Torah. But if you look through the confession of the Al-Ched, you'll see that a good number of them, and maybe even most of them, have to do not with the sins between man and Hashem, but between man and another person. So rather than Yom Kippur being a kind of thing between us and Hashem, and the halacha is, of course, that if you've offended another person, that there is no forgiveness until you have contacted that person and asked for mechila and have done whatever is necessary to get forgiveness from that person. Now, since any offense toward a person, I mean, if a person were to steal, which is an offense min adam l'chaver, right? It is also a sin to Hashem. Right? And so if a person does tshuva and promises he will never sin again, but if he has not corrected the offense toward the person who he stole from, if he has not returned the stolen item, and he has not asked for mechila from the person from whom he stole, then Hashem will not forgive it. So, the forgiveness of Yom Kippur on so many things is dependent on one person forgiving the other. Now, the idea of forgiveness, there's so many things as I thought about it. In fact, you might guess that I'm going to write a book about forgiveness. Right? And it's a thing that needs, I think, a great deal of clarification. I've seen situations in which people have carried resentments and have not forgiven. And they carry resentments for months and for years. Of course, it's never a good situation. But I have seen it cause tragedy within families, where siblings will not talk to each other. They carry resentment. Sometimes parents and children parents-in-law and children-in-law. And it's particularly tragic when families are torn apart by this. So that, for example, it's not unusual that there's some kind of strife within the family and two siblings are not talking to each other. And then there is a simcha, right? And one brother calls up the other brother and he says, if my other brother is going to come to the bar mitzvah, I won't come. Or, if you're inviting my sister to the chassan, to the wedding, I will not come. It's either me or her. And I've had so many of these situations, and in addition to this being a terrible thing within itself, the pain that the parents have when they see that their children are not getting along with each other, and that one child cannot come to a family simply because they fight with another one. Why? Because there's been no forgiveness. Now, sometimes a person has suffered from something that somebody did. They're offended about whatever. And sometimes it may be a minor thing, sometimes it may be serious in that. And then they say, forgive him? Never. I'll never forgive him as long as I live. I've heard that many, many times. He doesn't deserve to be forgiven. The mistake is that we think that by forgiveness, you're doing the other person a kindness. Now, maybe that too. But the most important thing about forgiving is it's for yourself, not for the other person. I had a situation where a patient of mine who was a recovering alcoholic, he had been sober for a number of years, he was taken advantage of by some people, and they ended up ruining him financially. And so one day I met him and I asked him how he was adjusting to what had happened to him. And he said, I'm very angry and very bitter at what they did to me. But I will go to a meeting tonight at Alcoholics Anonymous and I'll try to drop off my resentments. Because you see, doctor, he said, if I hang on to these resentments, I'll drink again. And it occurred to me that this person is fortunate because he realizes how dangerous it is to hang on to a resentment against someone. And he knows that in his situation, the resentment will make him drink again. But what about those of us who don't have drinking problems? So hanging on to resentments is not going to make us drink again. But hanging on to resentments takes a toll on our physical and emotional health. Now, Shlomo HaMelech said it so clearly. Kas b'chek kisilim yanuach. Anger rests in the bosom of a fool. Now, there's a problem with our understanding of anger. Because in Hebrew we have this one word, kas, and it refers to different things. Somebody provokes you, does something offensive to you, right? And so you have that feeling of anger. Right? That's a normal feeling. There's not much you can do about that. It's just like if you put your hand on a hot stove and it burns, you can't do anything, you're not going to feel the burn. So if somebody provokes you, you cannot avoid feeling the anger. In fact, the Chafetz Chaim, no one ever saw him act in anger. The Chafetz Chaim used to come in at midnight to the Bais Medrash and open up the Aron Kodesh, and used to tearfully pray that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take away his feelings of anger. Now, he was certainly in control of himself that he didn't act angry at anyone. But he had the feeling, and he didn't want it. And he couldn't control it, so he asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take it away from him. So, there is the feeling of anger, which is a normal thing when somebody provokes you. There's nothing you can do about that, except do what the Chofetz Chaim does. And that's kas. Kas refers to the feeling of anger. And then there's another term for kas, and that is how you react. Kol ha-koes ki'ilu davar dezot. If somebody is in anger, it's as bad as idolatry. That doesn't mean if you feel anger. Oh, you're all davar dezot. Chofetz Chaim is not chassid shalom of davar dezot. What that refers to is what the Talmud says: if anybody breaks things in anger, or tears his clothes in anger, or acts destructively, that is davar dezot. Oh, so now we have something else. Feeling anger, that's a normal thing. You can't help that. But how you react, you can control that. And if you react with rage, that is equivalent to davar dezot. Okay. So we have to find ways of how to deal with our feelings so that it doesn't end up in a rage reaction. But I don't want to go into that tonight. So, kas is anger, and kas is the reaction. And then there's the third thing. Okay, so somebody did something to offend you, and so you felt kas, you felt anger. How long are you going to hang on to that feeling? An hour? A day? A week? 27 years? How long are you going to hang on to that?
How about until the person apologizes?
I'm sorry?
How about until the person apologizes? And what if the person doesn't apologize?
Oh, so let's assume that the person doesn't apologize. Right? Whether he apologizes or not, whether he deserves it or not, if you're hanging on to that feeling, you're the one who's suffering. And that's why Shlomo HaMelech says, Kas b'chei ksilin yonuach. If you allow it to rest in your bosom, if you don't get rid of that anger, right? He says, that's foolish, you're going to be suffering. So, if somebody did something wrong to me, and I'm very angry at him, if I don't find ways of getting rid of that resentment, I'm the one who's going to be bothered by it. I'm going to be the one who's going to be sleepless at night, or getting headaches or backaches or whatever. The person who offended me, he couldn't care less. He walked away from him. So, the third category of kas is resentment. Now, the Torah tells us this, that if somebody did something to you that offended you, right? You ask the person, look, can you please lend me your electric stove? And he said, no. Okay. 3 weeks later, there's a snowfall, and he says, can I borrow your snowblower, your snow thrower? Here you don't have that problem. But in America we have snow throwers. So you say, you have the chutzpah to ask me, just 3 weeks ago I asked you to borrow your snow, and you said no. Right? Now you want me to tell you my snow thrower? No way. The Torah says, Chalili, you're not allowed to say that. Lo tikom, that's taking revenge. You're not allowed to take revenge. Okay. So, you give him the snow thrower. Then you want to say to him, look at the difference between me and you. When I asked you for your snow, you didn't give it to me. Right? And now asking me for my snow thrower, I'm giving it to you. I just want to show you I'm more mensch than you are. No, you're not allowed to say that. Lo tito. Another issue. You can't take revenge, and you can't even do the thing. Okay? and tell him, I'm not like you. He wants to borrow your snow thrower, give it to him, and keep your mouth shut, don't say a word. Okay. Tu isu. Then the Torah says, Lo tisna et achicha b'levacha. Don't carry any hatred for another person in your heart. I mean, I'm angry about why he didn't give me the saw when I needed it, and then he took my snow thrower, right? And so I don't feel good at it. I have a very bad feeling about it. So Torah said, no. Get rid of that. You're not allowed to carry hatred for another person in your heart. That's the same Torah that says, Lo tochal nevela. That's the same Torah that says that you're not allowed to work on Shabbat. And so a person who either takes revenge, or says, no, I'm a better mensch than you, or carries a resentment for someone, that person is violating Torah, just as the same person who eats a treasure sandwich. Same Torah. In fact, as Efrat Chaim pointed out, that carrying a resentment, carrying a hatred against another person, even if he deserved it, Torah says you gotta find a way to get rid of it. So the Efrat Chaim says, if a person goes and eats treif, that's a terrible sin. Right? But it took him 10 minutes to eat that sandwich, so he had a sin that lasted 10 minutes. If he is walking around with hatred for another person in his heart, right, then he is doing a sin 27, 24, 365. Then every moment he's doing a sin. In which case, carrying a resentment to another person is worse than eating a ham sandwich. A ham sandwich is bad enough. Right? But as the Efrat Chaim says, right, the person did it, that's tshuva for it, whatever. But he carries a resentment against another person. He might not even realize that he's doing something wrong. Now it's very interesting that if you look in some of the Siddurim, especially the larger Siddurim, before the Kriyat Shema at night, there is a paragraph that says, "Ribono shel olam, I am hereby forgiving everyone that has offended me in any way, physically, financially, emotionally. Don't let anyone ever have punishment because of me." That's a wonderful tefillah to say. But we have to mean it. But what I have to mean it is, I think the story goes about Rabbi, that someone came and asked him for mechila because I said something bad about you. So Rabbi said, "What did you say about me?" So he told him. So Rabbi said, "Come back in 2 weeks." Came back in 2 weeks, and Rabbi said, I forgive you. He said, now the reason I told you to come back in 2 weeks is because when you told me what you had said about me, I was very angry. And if I had said to you that I forgive, that I'm Michael, it would be just words, because it wasn't genuine. So what I did these past 2 weeks, I learned in Musa until I came to the point where I was able to say with my whole heart that I sincerely forgive you. So when we say the tefillah at night, that's so beautiful, and it's the best sedative there is. When you can go to sleep with a clear conscience that you're not carrying a grudge against anyone else. As one of my friends said, he says, I think that carrying a resentment against someone is allowing someone whom you don't like to live inside your head without paying you any rent. And it's true. Why should I let someone else be a boss over me, come in and sit in my brain, and I have to think about it? So I have to find a way of getting rid of that resentment. There are ways of getting rid of resentment. First of all, my mother used to refer to the holy al-tadin. The Talmud says, al-tadin et chaverecha ad shetagia linkomeh. Don't judge another person until you've been in his position. Because so many times, if we only understood why a person said something, or why a person did something, what his circumstances were, we wouldn't take offense if only we knew. There was a story that Rabbi Levin told, that he was once participating in a funeral, going to a levaya, and in the levaya, in the funeral procession, was a person who was the best friend of the niftar. And as the levaya was going past a stand where they were selling flower pots, this man, a close friend of the niftar, went and he bought a flower pot. And Rabbi said that upset him very much. You know? Here he's participating in the funeral of his best friend, and that's the time they go buy a flower pot. And so he felt he has an obligation to give him musa. You see somebody do wrong, yeah, you should tell him in a nice way. So he went over and he told him, look, I think that what you did was very inappropriate. So the man said, look, Rabbi, let me tell you what happened. This man died of a very contagious disease. And the doctor said that everything that he had must be destroyed, must be burned. But he had a pair of tefillin. And they said they had to burn the tefillin also. So I asked them to please don't burn the tefillin. They said, no, we have to burn everything. I said, look, trust me. Give me the tefillin and I will dispose of them properly. So I took the tefillin, and one of the ways to dispose of the tefillin properly is to bury them, just like we do with shemot, things that you do. But you have to put them in a container in order to bury them. So I stopped off and picked up the flower pot so that when we bury this person, I will be able to bury the tefillin with him. So Rabbi Levin said, after that, I never passed judgment on a person until I had an opportunity to ask him to explain why he did it. How many times has it happened that a person was offended by something that I said and I didn't mean to do it? I certainly didn't mean to offend him, but he happened to be offended by it. So, I would like everyone to give me the benefit of the doubt, so that not to hold a grudge against me because I didn't really mean to do it. It was so al-tadin chaverecha. That same benefit of the doubt we should give someone else. And if we only understood what might have happened to the person and why he did it, who knows what kind of pressure he was under, what kind of stress he was under. And maybe it was a situation out between a father and a son who haven't talked to each other for a while, where the son had done something very foolish to offend the father, but the father doesn't understand what kind of emotional stress the son was under that caused him to do that. So hopefully maybe we can make some reconciliation. There's something that we ought to understand about the working of the mind. You know, this thing that we have inside our head, it's an unbelievable mechanism. You think your computer is a good mechanism? Or your iPod? There are 100 billion parts in that brain. 100 billion, and they're all interconnected. Unbelievably complex. And so the mind, which operates through the brain, is capable of doing many, many, many things. Now there's things about our mind that we ought to understand, that there are different levels of mind. There are things that we are aware of, the things that we are currently aware of. That's the conscious mind. Then there is what we call the pre-conscious. Pre-conscious means we're not aware of it right now, but if I try to be aware of it, I can be aware of it. So right now, you're listening to me. That's your conscious. Right? You're aware of what you do. You're not thinking right now of what you had for breakfast this morning. But if I were to ask you, what did you have for breakfast this morning? You'll probably remember. But where was that memory? You weren't thinking about it until I told you about it. So it wasn't in your conscious mind. It was in the pre-conscious that's accessible. But then there are memories that you have that no matter how hard you try, you can't get to that. Because you see, what the mind is it's the hard drive of a computer. Everything that has ever happened to you since the day you were born is registered on that hard drive. And nothing is ever deleted. So, there's an enormous amount of material, and you can't remember them. And if a person was to point a gun at you, you're still going to remember. Let me give you an example. I had a patient who I wanted to treat with doing something with hypnosis. And so I put him into a hypnotic trance. And later on, after the trance was over, he said, "Well, Doc, I guess it didn't work." I said, "What do you mean it didn't work?" "Well, I wasn't hypnotized." I said, "Yes, you were." "No, I didn't feel anything different." I said, "You weren't supposed to feel anything different." "I mean, I heard everything you said." I said, "Yeah, you were not supposed to feel anything different. You had some weird idea of hypnosis." No, Doc. You're just saying that I wasn't hypnotized." I said, "Okay, tell you what. I want you to tell me the names of several of the children who were in your second grade." Now, this is a man who's 50 years old. He said, "The kids in the second grade?" I said, "Yeah." "I don't remember it." I said, "Think hard." "No, I can't remember. Yeah, that was over 45 years ago." I said, "Think hard." "I can't remember." "Okay, let's go back under hypnosis." So I did the hypnosis thing again. And then one of the things you can do is age regression. I took him back, week by week, month, year by year, until I got him back into when he was 8 years old. And I said, "Now tell me who was sitting at your left." He told me. "And who's sitting in front of you? And who's sitting behind you? And who's sitting at your right?" Later on, when I woke him up, he said, "Oh my God, I haven't thought of those names for 40 years." Now, without hypnosis, if I had told them, "Look, if you don't tell me the names of those kids who are in your second grade, I'll shoot you." You couldn't get it, the memories are there. That's what we mean, that there are things in our mind that are in the subconscious or in the unconscious. Some call it unconscious, some call it subconscious. Now, what we are aware of at any moment, right, is just a very superficial thing of what goes on now. But what's in our unconscious is memory since the day we were born. I'm 80 years old, I've got 80 years of memory stored here. And I have no access to it. Sometimes things might happen that I might, suddenly remember something that happened 70 years ago. Something reminded me of, may come in a dream. But most of the time we don't have access to our memories. But those memories stay there, they don't go away, and they can affect how we act, how we feel, and how we act. You know, you think that you know why you're doing something, right? Most of the time you know why you're doing something. But many times, you may be doing something without the slightest idea as to why you're doing it. Another example? The great Dr. Freud, this is how he got the idea of the subconscious or the unconscious having an effect on a person's life. He attended a lecture in France where the professor was demonstrating hypnosis. And he wanted to show the people what it means to have a post-hypnotic suggestion. So he asked for a volunteer. One of the group came down, and he hypnotized them. And he told them, after you come out of hypnosis, you'll go back to your seat. Sometimes later during the lecture, I will scratch my right ear. And that will be a signal to you that you should take and open your umbrella. And you will not remember that I told you to do so. A very simple post-hypnotic suggestion. I've done it myself numerous times. So, he woke the guy up, guy went back to his seat, sat down, and the professor continued with the lecture. And about 15 minutes later, the lady goes like this. Okay? This man gets up, picks up his umbrella, opens it up, and stands like this. And everybody starts laughing at him. And the professor says, why did you do that? Why did you go bring the umbrella here in this room? He says, I don't know, I just felt I had to do it. Did anybody tell you to do it? No. Do you think that I told you to do it when you were under hypnosis? I don't think so, I don't remember. So Freud says, look, we know why he did it. He did it because he had a command to do it. Where was that command? He doesn't remember that command. That command was in his subconscious or unconscious. And yet, something of which he was not aware made him do something like opening his umbrella in the room. So Freud came up with this idea that there may be many things that we do that are influenced by thoughts in our own conscious. Now, there may be things that people have offended us 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and we had a resentment against them. But we forgot about it. I haven't thought about what that guy did to me for the last 40 years. In fact, 2 weeks after he did it, I forgot about it. You forgot about it. What happened with that memory? It's in the hard drive of the computer. It's sitting there. And the problem is, that the mind has a very tricky way of operating. Things that are similar, and similar feelings, the mind joins them together. We call that a complex. Which means that if during the last 40 years you collected resentments against people, each individual thing may not be significant, but the mind has put them all together. And they can certainly affect the way you feel. And that's why it's so important to get rid of them as soon as you can. Because if you don't, they'll linger around and they can cause trouble. I had a situation with a man who, he wasn't my patient. He came to a psychiatrist and he said, look, I can't take it anymore. I find myself, I'm so irritable, I have a short fuse, I lose my temper at my wife and my children, I get headaches, I've got backaches. And he says, it's not that I don't know what's causing it. I know what's causing it. He said, my father was terribly abusive to me. He used to scream at me and call me bad names and insult me and whatever. And so many times I wanted to run away from home. He says, but now I've been married for 12 years, I have a family. My father's not in my life anymore. But I can't get rid of this feeling of anger that I had for what he did to me during the years that I was a child. And it's eating me up. And I've gone to psychiatrists, and I've taken medication, I've gone to psychologists, and nothing is helping. So this psychologist said, well, did you ever think of forgiving your father? He says, forgive him! I'll never forgive him. He ruined me. He says, I want to ask the love of Shiloh. Am I obligated to keep it up, to respect my father? And the Lord says, well, when you're in his presence, you should act respectfully. But you don't have to be in his presence. Yeah? You don't have to go and see him. He says, yeah, but my father continues to call me. And he wants to see his grandchildren. I don't want him to see my children. So the psychologist said, look, nothing else is working. Okay? I think we have to try and help you forgive your father. So a few days later he came back and he says, look, I don't know about this forgiving business, but I got to do something to get rid of this. So tell me what I have to do to forgive me. I said, wait a minute. It isn't that easy. It isn't that easy. You've got to work on forgiveness. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So let me give you an example of the kind of things that can help for forgiveness. Rabbi Salant, the great founder of the mission, Rabbi Salant was traveling to Vilna, and there was a young man sitting in the same cabin in the train, and the young man says, put out that cigar, it's very offensive to me. So Salam could have said, look, this is the smoking cabin. You know, you're irritated by smoke, going to another kind of cabin. Well, but the smoker didn't say anything. He put out his cigar. A few minutes later, this young man says, can't stand that old man. Look at that, he's got the window open and causing a draft on me. So Rabbi Salam said, I didn't open the window. No? But if it's bothering you, I'll be glad to close it. When we come to Vilna, there's a throng of people waiting to greet Rabbi Salam. And when this young man saw who it was to whom he had been so rude, he felt terrible. And so he found out where Rabbi Salam was lodging, and he came over the next day and asked him for forgiveness. And Rabbi Salam said, I'm moichel, and I was moichel right at the time, I don't care. And then Rabbi Salam said, by the way, what brings you to Vilna? So he said, I came to get certification to become a shochet. Oh, he said, I may be able to help you with that. My son-in-law is the Rav here in Vilna, and he may be able to help you get the certification. So he introduced the young man to his son-in-law. And his son-in-law later tells the Rishon, I can't give a certification. He is no way in shape to be a shochet. So what the Rishon did, he engaged one of the senior shochtetim in Vilna to teach this person all the laws of shechita and to prepare him for certification. And after he got the certification, the Rishon arranged for him to get a position in the community to be a shochet. So somebody asked the Rishon, why did you go to all that extent for this person? So the Rishon said, look, when he was rude to me, I said I was moichel. But I can't be sure that still in my heart I didn't carry a grudge against him. So I had to do something to try and get rid of that grudge. And one of the things that you can do to get rid of a grudge or something is try to do something nice for him. That's not easy to do, but it's also hard to do. So one thing you can always do is you can ask Hashem to be kind to that person, to give him a bracha. It's not going to hurt you. And to this young man who was carrying resentment against his father, incidentally, when he went into therapy to try and achieve forgiveness, many other things came out that he wasn't aware of. And that was, he was carrying resentment against his mother for not standing up for him against the father. So he carried a resentment against the mother. And then he had a resentment against the brother. And then he carried a resentment on a contractor who cheated him in a job that he did. And he carried a resentment against his wife, and he said, I'm even ashamed to tell you what it was. He said, we had been planning for a skiing trip, and 2 days before we were to go, she fell and broke her leg. And I remember how angry I was at her. And she ruined our skiing trip. He says, it's foolish, but I felt angry. Anyway, as they went down, it turned out, right, that he felt that his problem was that he was carrying a resentment against his father, which was true. But he was also carrying resentment on 20 other people who he didn't think of. And that's what happens when our mind puts all of these things together and adds up all of these minor resentments, right, and makes a mountain out of a bunch of molehills. And if we don't get rid of the resentments, it takes a toll on us. It's letting somebody live inside your brain without paying rent, and not only does he live inside your brain, but he throws all his trash around in it. As I was writing this, something suddenly occurred to me. And another memory that goes way back, a good 74 years. As kids we were playing, and if we had a fight, which kids do, we would say, I'm mad at you forever. I remember that so clearly. 3 hours later, we were playing together again. How come? What happened with mad at you forever? You see, the resentment of being angry at my planet when I'm 6 years old, right, is an isolated thing. And because I want to play with them again, so I'm going to get over that. But when I'm 80, I have accumulated 80 years of resentments, which at 6 years old doesn't happen. And that's why a 6-year-old doesn't carry resentment. Right? I'm mad at you forever, and forever doesn't last more than 3 hours. But what happens when we get along in life and we accumulate more things, and more things happen that offend us, come on. If you drive in traffic, you develop resentments. Every day. You can't avoid it. It even happens now in Israel, but especially in Israel with the kind of driving that's here. It's going to develop resentments. Now, I mean, there's such a thing as road rage where people have done crazy things because of road rage. But even if you don't do anything, you mutter under your breath, and you say some very unattractive words about the driver. But not only that, other kinds of things happen that resentment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the person even intended to hurt you. You know, sometimes you bump into something. Yeah. What are you hitting the table for? Yeah. Table didn't hurt you. Yeah. Just a mistake that mothers make. You know, the child bumps his head, is running around wild, bumps his head to the table, and the mother said, bad table. Hey, what are you teaching the kid? Table didn't mean to hurt him. Don't blame the table. Like the child told us, they study, you got to be careful how you run around. They shouldn't bump into things. So instead, I don't carry resentment against the table. And we carry resentments against people who never meant to hurt us. And sometimes we carry resentments against ourselves. There's a whole pasha. I'm going to end up with a big book on this forgiveness thing. Again, the mind plays on tricks. So I want to take another case, a true case. This is the case of Chana. Chana was a young woman. She had a sister, and she felt that the mother favored her sister. Now that's unusual, not unusual. Now whether her mother did favor the sister or did not favor the sister, I don't know. But Chana felt that the mother favored the sister. And so she carried a resentment against her mother. But she was a very fine Jewish daughter, and she felt that it's wrong to carry resentment against your parents, so she pushed it out of her mind. No, it's on the computer, it's on the hard drive. That resentment didn't go away. And then her mother died. Certainly, you can't ever get resentments against that person who died. And it's just not acceptable. Okay. A few years later, Chana gets married. And after a few months, she tells her husband, Nehemiah, that her mother-in-law, his mother, is showing favoritism to another daughter-in-law. And Nehemiah said, "Oh, she's not." She says, "Oh, I know she is." And she began looking at her mother-in-law, as though the mother-in-law is constantly favoring the other. And Nehemiah was pointing out to her, she's doing more for you than she does for her. She didn't hear that logic. And she began acting badly toward her mother-in-law. And of course, as she began acting badly toward her mother-in-law, mother-in-law began acting badly to her, so it had a whole chult already of her, Action, reaction. And when she told Nehemiah about it, and Nehemiah said, "That's not so, now you're taking your mother's side against me." And the Shalom Bayis was becoming destroyed. Fortunately, they decided to go for marriage counseling. And the marriage counselor referred her to a psychologist. And the psychologist worked with her. And it turned out that he was able to show her that what she has done is take the resentment that had been stored up against her mother, which she never allowed herself to feel, and she projected it onto her mother-in-law, which is one of the ways in which the unconscious mind works. And as a result of that, she was able to get over it and was able to develop a good relationship with her mother-in-law. But otherwise, this carrying on of the resentments almost ended up in a divorce. So there's so many, many ways in which we have to be cautious to get rid of resentments and to be able to sincerely forgive. Not the person deserves forgiveness. He may be a scoundrel, he doesn't deserve it. Right? But you're not doing him a favor. You're doing a favor for yourself. What can you do? Well, if you saw someone went out of his way to do things for the person in order to uproot the feeling of anger he might have had. What you might do is, there's ways to deal with it. You heard that person is going to marry off his daughter, so you call him up and say Mazel Tov. He's going to have bar mitzvah, stop off and give him Mazel Tov at the bar mitzvah. If you really feel badly about him, say to Alexa, please don't hold it against him, I'm loyal to him. Please give him a bracha, bless him with all kinds of good things. That's what we say before Krishna. These are the kinds of things that we can and constantly remember. Don't judge another person by his actions because you don't know what kinds of things cause him to do. So these are the kinds of things when we get to Yom Kippur. And we should realize, Yom Kippur is not only for things between us and Hashem. Yom Kippur is between us and other people. In fact, maybe that's the majority of things of Yom Kippur. And that when we forgive, right, we unload ourselves of a burden. We kick that guy out of our brain who's been living up in there without paying us any rent, and maybe throwing his trash around and covering up our brain. And when we do that, now that doesn't mean you always have to become best friends with him again. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. And you don't have to justify always what he's done. But just to be able to try and rid yourself of the toxic resentment, something which erodes our mental health and our physical health. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I think as Yom Kippur is coming, that's so tremendously important. And that when we forgive others, then by virtue of the fact that when we forgive others, midah keneged midah, when we forgive others, even if they don't deserve it, we can ask Hashem to forgive us even though we don't deserve it. We hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will forgive us whatever it is that we've done wrong, to another person or to him, to Hashem, and will bless us with a healthy, happier, G'mat Simcha Hashem and Tovim to come.
I just want to give, if I can give the Rav a bracha. Last year I phoned the Rav, and the Rav always answers Twersky here, and I'm there trying to speak in the third sentence, the fourth sentence. It's the Rav thing, but he calls himself Twersky, and I'm always flustered, what am I going to say now? And the Rav says, I can't come to Efrat because the Rav wasn't feeling well enough. I want to give the bracha, and I also just finished your book on 80 years of Gevurah. I want to give a bracha to Rav, that the Rav should continue to be able to come for another 40 years to Efrat, and every year he should fill up another book to inspire us all. May the Rav and all of us be blessed with the Shana Tova. Just one announcement. Thank you very much to the Glassmans. Thank you for sponsoring this event. Thank you very much to Jeremy Rhodes for always dealing with the technical problems. And just one thing, Women's Bet Midrash has got a Yom Eon on Wednesday here in Efrat. There's details here. And tomorrow the women from Gush Katif have got an event in the shore. Please come. Thank you very much for coming. And
Hey guys. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. I just want to video the books over here.
Anybody have a tank?
That's it from the
Yes, it's all good. What about this? Huh?
I understand videoing it.
Oh,